Ready or Not is a prime example of a group of developers attempting to revive a mostly dead genre. It was a super long time ago now, but there used to be a time when slow-paced, realistic tactical shooters were the popular thing on PCs. Long before Ubisoft pulled Tom Clancy's name through the mud, his brand was known for some good tactical shooters like Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six. But this game takes its biggest influences from the SWAT franchise, a series that disappeared after releasing the critically acclaimed SWAT 4 in 2005. I've seen people refer to this game as the unofficial return to that series, going as far as to call it SWAT 5. Does it deserve to be in the same conversation as those games, or is this an early access cash grab relying on being associated with classic titles?
Get down, all of you! Police, hands up!
We've got a dead suspect here.
34. Copy that, Delta Team 77 is about 5 minutes.
If you've played SWAT 4, the gameplay of Ready or Not will be immediately familiar to you. You get into a place, shoot, bang bang, throw some cuffs on some dudes, and call it into talk. This is much easier said than done. The first thing that most people will notice about Ready or Not is that the game is really fucking hard. This game uses a realistic damage system, meaning that getting hit with a bullet is gonna hurt a lot. Despite what 1980s action movies would lead us to believe, guns actually kill people, and they're pretty goddamn good at it. The difficulty is amplified by the absolutely cracked AI. These guys will aimbot you with zero notice, sending your ass straight back to headquarters. I swear these dudes have watched one too many MLG compilations with the way that they throw out these 360 no-scopes. Your life can end in an instant from something as simple as peeking around the wrong corner. Other times, you won't even know where the shots are coming from. All you know is that you probably should have put a little bit more money into your life insurance policy. Speaking of life insurance policies, say hey to my sponsor, the General Insurance. Hey gamers, make sure to keep up on your life insurance policy. But your guns are just as lethal, meaning a well-placed shot will send a guy on an all-expense-paid trip to Dirt Nap, USA. All the weapons in the game feel damn good to use. Each of them feels like the right mixture of accurate, powerful, cumbersome, and lethal. As much as I love those older tactical shooters, the actual shooting is what's always kept me away from them. I mean, the first Rainbow Six doesn't even draw a gun model on the screen. It's kinda hard to enjoy a shooting game when you can't see the thing that you are shooting with. Here, the guns sound, look, and operate just the way that you would expect them to, being usable in semi-auto or burst mode, but nearly uncontrollable if you set it to full auto. Though it does seem that all the guns have a mostly vertical recoil pattern, so you can counteract the full auto if you really need to. Just like real guns, these things are really loud. Even with a suppressor, these things thump, making every shootout a cacophony of noise. The sound design during these encounters is great. It makes you feel like you're in a real life or death scenario. There's also a good amount of guns in the game for you to play around with. You have every type of gun you could really reasonably need. Long barrel ARs for engaging targets at a distance, SMGs for mid to short range, shotguns for up close and personal, and pistols for when you're completely out of ammo. Each of these guns can be customized to your liking. You can equip lights, lasers, sights, suppressors, and handles. It's not the most in-depth customization I've ever seen, but you can make the gun that fits your playstyle and the needs of the level. There are issues with the customization system. The first is a pretty minor nitpick. I wish that you could customize your gun in the same place that you could choose your gun. As of right now, I have to walk from one locker to the bench, or from this guy to this bench. I don't know why this isn't all in the same menu. It would save some time and some confusion. The second is a little bit more significant, and that's the general lack of information. In most games, even other games in the simulation space, the menu will give you an idea of when an attachment changes, typically using a bar or numbers. This game just has the name of the attachment on screen with no inclination of exactly what it does. I understand that they're going for a more realistic take, and having a -10 to damage is a little ridiculous, but at the same time I would like to see what the changes are. Third has to do with the sights. Using COD 2019 as an example, when you're customizing the gun you can move it around in a 3D space, which is useful to see how a sight looks before picking it. I wish I could do that in this game because some of the sights don't give me the picture that I want. There's nothing worse than going through the menu, picking the sight, loading the game, and realizing that it's kinda ass. But overall, the combat is visceral, grounded, and fast. It's simultaneously something you're deathly afraid of, but also look forward to. Things can turn into a shitstorm in a moment's notice. Luckily, the shooting lets you rectify these problems if you're good enough.
Down on your knees. Hands up now. Drop your knees.
Unarmed contact.
Are those handcuffs?
While the combat is fast, frantic, and chaotic, most of your time won't be spent in firefights. Most of your time will be spent moving from place to place, clearing out as many rooms as you can without firing any shots at all. This heightens the moments of violence that eventually do come to play, but it also makes the downtime more tense, as you really never know what could be around any corner. Even if you think you've completely cleared out an area with your whole team, you could be wiped out in an instant because somebody didn't check a certain corner. The only safe place in this game is a loading screen or headquarters, otherwise you need to be on your toes the entire time when you're playing. One of the main jobs that you'll be executing is making sure that civilians are detained. Much like other things in this game, this is easier said than done. For every guy that you have that hits the deck the second you tell him to, you have 10 other people that are going to have a mind of their own. And that means that they're going to go running off and tell you something like go fuck yourself only to end up dead later. My advice is to never ever chase the people running away. I think I've died more times chasing after a crazed civilian than actually trying to engage with a suspect. They're like a danger magnet, I swear. There's also a huge liability when civilians aren't detained. Just like in real life, it's not always clear who's just a civilian and who's an active threat, leading to more civilian casualties than I'd like to admit, but these casualties are treated extremely harshly. When you finish a mission, you're scored with a performance metric. A civilian death or even shooting a suspect who's dropped their gun can result in a low or negative score. To get a high score, you need to move fast, but also not so fast that you and the team are making mistakes. Finishing a mission is already a challenge, but getting a good grade can feel like an impossibility. In some ways, it reminds me of games like Devil May Cry, where just finishing a level can be difficult, but really doing it with style and accurately is the challenge of the game. One of the other things you'll do outside of combat is either talking with your real-life team or ordering the AI around for different strategies and entry opportunities. Sometimes you'll want to bust in 2 doors at once. Sometimes you'll look under a door with a gadget and decide it's not worth going into. Other times you'll get careless going through a quote cleared room only to blow yourself up by a booby-trapped door. Remember to always check for traps even if you haven't seen one that game, because the one time that you say fuck it and just open a door will be the time that a trap blows you up. Some missions will have you collecting drugs, defusing bombs, or trying to rescue civilians. The bomb missions in particular are stressful as you want to clear out the bombs as fast as possible. There's a bunch of civilians running around, and there's dudes with guns. So you have to try and neutralize your targets while also defusing bombs and also not getting your head blown off in the process. While the combat is great, it's all these things that you do outside of the actual combat that will decide your success. I would say that 25% of the game requires raw gameplay skill, while the other 75% requires good judgment and strategy. This is probably the only non-MOBA game where you're likely to spend a good amount of time in the pre-game lobby, making sure everybody has and knows their roles.
Hands up! Hands up! Drop the weapon now!
Drop your weapon now!
Drop it now! Drop your weapons! Drop the weapon now! Drop your weapons!
Put the gun down now!
There's other things that I liked that don't really fit into the combat or non-combat categories, and I want to run through them real quick. First, I like how smooth the entire experience is. There's not a lot of HUD to get in your way, only really showing where you've been hit by a bullet and not really too much else. When you are playing in single player, issuing commands to your team isn't cumbersome. The game is smart enough to have a lot of contextual cues to follow, so if I'm looking at a civilian that's sitting on the ground and I hit the Z button, it'll automatically tell one of my guys to tie him up. If I'm looking at a door and I hit the Z button, it'll tell him to breach the door, things like that. It's useful for when you don't want to be fumbling through the contextual menus. With that being said, issuing specific commands on how to breach and clear a room does just take a few seconds, and when you do that, the AI executes it reliably. Within gunfights, your teammates can range from completely cracked to completely worthless, but when being issued commands, they're pretty much always spot on. In general, the game is actually pretty easy to pick up and play. Sometimes playing a more simulation style shooter can be like playing the piano with the amount of keys that you have to remember, but here everything is pretty simple to figure out. It's as easy to pick up and play as pretty much any other shooter on the market. I also really like the graphics. When there's dark parts of the map, it is dark. There's no cheesing it by pumping up your screen brightness or messing with your settings. Nighttime is a very dark place to be. This means that you'll likely throw on a flashlight, or if it's a completely dark mission, night vision. The flashlights look really good and interact with the environment well, but the night vision is just too cool not to use. The night vision also limits your visibility because they are goggles. This kind of idea applies to anything you wear on your face. They all have subtle changes on what you can see. This game's full of a lot of small details like that, but it is those small details that show how much the devs really care. They could have just thrown a green filter on the screen and made it bright, but these things actually work as they're intended and worked like they do in real life, and that's really cool. The arsenal got the same level of attention, with them moving and reacting the way that you would expect them to. All the guns feel good to use, they look really great, and overall I like the guns that they have in the game at the current time.
Put your hands in the air! Hands in the air! This is the police! Hands up!
But no game is perfect or without flaws, and this game has plenty of them. First is that sometimes your gun can just kinda get stuck on stuff. When you're up close to an object, your dude will point his gun to the sky, which makes sense, you can't just stick it through a box. But sometimes you just want to peek around that box, and he refuses to point the gun in the right direction. I find this issue to be the most prevalent with chest-high cover. It's annoying because you just want to be able to shoot, but he doesn't quite move his shoulders in the way that he needs to shoot the gun. Second could be a me issue, but as cool as the lighting is with the dark and the light sections, sometimes it seems like it's not working properly. It's almost like when you walk up to an exhibit at a museum and the lights come on when you get close to it. I don't know what the hell's happening here, and I've tried tweaking some settings, but I can't seem to figure it out. It's not game breaking, but I'd be lying if it wasn't jarring. There's also some balancing issues at the moment, like the riot shield being completely overpowered. This thing is overpowered enough that I would say it's borderline a requirement to have on the squad. A lot of the enemies in this game have a shoot first and ask questions never policy, and they will go full aggro on the first thing that they see. This makes a shield man invaluable, as without one, those dudes are going to shoot your non-shielded ass. Shield guy has nothing to worry about because, like old school COD, this thing doesn't seem to break. It can make your vision useless, but you'll never be in danger of taking any actual damage. So usually what we'll end up doing is have a shield guy in front, you pop a flashbang, shield guy goes in, gets shot a bunch of times, and you shoot the guys when they're trying to shoot the shield man. It's a little cheesy, it's a little unrealistic, and I think that they could do some tweaking around this shield to make it a little bit less powerful or less necessary to have on the team. In multiplayer, this isn't a huge problem. You can coordinate with your friends and decide who will get to play Big Shield Boy. It's not my favorite position, but aforementioned, it's more or less required. The shield problem is a bigger problem in single player, and it just kinda sucks, because unlike in SWAT, you can't set what your team are going to bring into a mission. It seems to be kind of random. So if you want a shield on the team, you'll have to be the one to carry it. Relying on your teammates' questionable AI to handle firefights fights without getting themselves killed. Hey, yeah, sorry, caught this one in the edit. You can change what your teammates bring into a battle. I just didn't catch it the first time. Speaking of AI, some of these enemies are just bullshit. I understand having the ability to shoot through walls, and that's fine, but sometimes they'll just start firing through a wall and clear out your entire squad. I get if I'm firing a gun or making a bunch of noise on the other side of the wall, but they do it on a whim. They'll do it whenever they have a feeling that there's maybe a dude that might be possibly on the other side of a wall. It's annoying and it feels cheesy. Some of the civilian AI is brain dead too. I get it, in real life people are going to act extremely erratically in a stressful and deadly situation, but some of these guys are complete morons. Some of them decide to go for a full marathon before deciding that you're not gonna kill them. Most of them don't make it very far because they will run directly into your gunfire as you're trying to fight a bad guy. I understand acting erratically. I do not understand running towards gunfire. I also had some issues with what feels like hit registration. I don't know what's happening in this clip, and yeah, I know the dude's a civilian, let's just move past that, but like, how did I not hit him? This has happened in other situations too, but this is one of the more blatant times. For every time that the shooting feels nice and precise, there's other times where I swear I was on a guy's head and it just didn't hit him. Once you do kill an enemy, there can be other issues that come up, mostly in the physics department. They can do that janky Skyrim thing of getting like half clipped into a wall, and it results in them going into a complete seizure state. And while yes, this is super funny to look at, and I like this kind of jank from time to time, it's also really noisy, which means it's impossible to hear where people are. But that's if you can hear where they are anyways. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like the directional audio could be a little bit better. Minus people actually saying something out loud or shooting, it's hard to find where an enemy is by sound alone. Comparing this to a game like Counter-Strike where I can hear you having a piss 4 blocks away from my house, it's a little bit jarring that I can't even hear these guys walking on the other side of a doorway. I hope that they can give these guys bigger footsteps or some kind of noise cue on when they're moving, because as it stands, you can get flanked with little to no audio cue. Another small complaint that I don't know how to solve is dying in multiplayer. Right now when you die in multiplayer, you just sit and watch the other people play. This works in something like Counter-Strike because the longest you're going to be sitting is a few minutes. But in this game, you're going to be sitting for a long time. You could realistically be sitting for 20 minutes or more. I think there needs to be something for dead players to do, because as it stands, once you're dead, you're worthless to your team and there's nothing you can really do, so it's just kind of you sitting there and being bored. One of the main issues I have with this game is the movement speed. I don't want to be moving at the speed of sound, and I totally understand not having a sprint function in the game, but sometimes I just want to go faster. Going back to SWAT 4, you moved faster in that game. And yeah, I know Americans and cops have gotten significantly fatter since 2005, but maybe we could drop the realism just a little bit. Yeah, the game's trying to be realistic, and a dude with plate armor, rifles, and accessories moving around like Tyreek Hill would bust that realism, but the speed can be a serious issue. To be clear, I don't think it's a problem all of the time. During the minute-to-minute gameplay, it usually isn't a problem. I want to clear a room with a slow and deliberate pace, so the default slow movement is pretty good for that. But when the rooms are mostly clear and I'm just trying to find that one guy that nobody called in, it can be really frustrating. The speed issue is only really compounded because of the map size. SWAT 4 had some decently sized maps, but for the most part they were contained. The maps were big enough to feel like real places without being cumbersome to navigate. But some of the maps in Ready or Not are bigger than a Warzone patch, making the movement speed a real issue when you're trying to find that last guy that's got a shotgun half up his ass in the bathroom so you can just finally end the mission. And as a solution, I don't think smaller maps is the answer. I like these larger maps because they can lead to tense 20-minute plus games, but sometimes I just wish I could drop my rifle or something just to be able to move a little bit faster. Maybe we should have another movement mode where it's just a little bit faster, but it takes longer to get to your gun or something. Something that's not quite sprinting, but it's faster than the base shuffle that you have going on. I don't know, maybe it's just me being impatient, but this is how I'm feeling about it at the moment. Speaking of at the moment, in the current build, there's not that many maps. There's really only 6 in the game with 2 unfinished testing levels. Each of the maps is very dense, pretty long, and can be played with multiple game types, but at the end of the day, 6 maps is 6 maps. These maps are really replayable and I do like their designs, but it's only 6 of them. And I'm only really mentioning this because for $40, it can be a little bit steep depending on who you are. If you're the kind of player that wants to play through the map one time and consider it finished, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be done with this game and feel like you didn't get good value out of it. But my biggest gripe with the game right now is that there's really no reason to be doing anything that you're doing in the game. I think the lack of any narrative motivation hurts the game a lot. I went back to play some SWAT 4 for this video, and those levels, while lacking in graphical fidelity, had a whole story to tell. There's a reason that people talk about some of those levels still, and it's not because of the gameplay in them. The levels were crammed with environmental storytelling, and while Ready or Not has some of that, it certainly isn't even in the same ballpark. You aren't taking out a dude building MAC-10s in his room that's filled with gun nut stuff, or confronting a group of cult members who's convinced that the end is near, or a serial killer standing with what would have been his next victim. You're just shooting some guys or arresting some guys for drugs and bombs and general violence. The criminals of Ready or Not are nothing more than NPCs. This wasn't the case in SWAT. The criminals were characters, individuals with thoughts, feelings, and ideals. In Ready or Not, they're nothing more than an obstacle to be overcome. Without much in the way of pre-mission or in-mission narrative, the game lacks a big part of what made SWAT so memorable. And for those of you who have never played SWAT before, you should give this FaceFull of Eyes video a watch to see what we're missing out on in Ready or Not.
Got your back.
I don't want to hear it.
Kill them all.
This is talk.
It's these elements that I think hold Ready or Not back from being the SWAT 5 that we want it to be. If Sierra and Irrational were still around to make a SWAT 5, it would absolutely play, look, and sound like this, and that's a big compliment. And while it might not be all the way there at the moment, that doesn't mean that it won't end up becoming the SWAT 5 we want it to be. The joy and pain of early access games is you never really know how it's going to go. There's a chance that this game builds out an interesting world of criminal stories and brings all of those missions together to create a holistic criminal world. But there's also a chance that it never does any of those things. There's a chance that it remains a series of disparate and unconnected levels with no kind of real narrative structure to bring it together. Although I think that the former scenario is more likely. These devs have put out a pretty polished, if somewhat janky game, bringing some of the best elements of old tactical shooters into a modern setting. All of this while dealing with controversy from major media outlets and parting ways with their old publisher. I hope that the future is bright for this game, as it is the best shooter I've played in 2022 and is one of the better co-op games. But only time will tell how this story will go. As far as if you should pick it up is debatable. The first thing I would say is to make sure that you're buying it for the content that the game currently has, not the content that you hope it adds in the future or the content that exists only in your head. And second of all, make sure you have some friends and that they're willing to pick up the game too. This game shines the brightest in co-op, and it's some of the most fun co-op shooting I've had in a long time. Single player isn't bad, and it certainly isn't a neglected part of the experience, but hitting Z to tell an NPC to move versus yelling at your buddies through the voice chat to tell them to move doesn't quite hit the same. If you have friends and are okay with paying $40 for what's ostensibly 6 maps and a handful of modes, then you should probably give it a go. If that sounds a bit steep for you, I would say wait and keep an eye on the development, because with friends or not, Ready or Not is a challenging and rewarding tactical shooter that has a lot of promise. It might not be ready to take the crown of SWAT 5 yet, but I'll watch the development with great interest. Have any of you guys played the old SWAT games? Have you guys played this one? What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments. Like the video if you liked it, dislike the video if you didn't, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
That's right, we're Japanese.